All right, I've got all my borders on. I've got my pinwheels in the corner. I'm really happy with how that looks. Really happy with how that looks. I think it's a nice way to kind of end it without, yeah, I like it a lot. Okay, so I do want to put on a final border, and I'm going to have the final border be, I think, the wood again. If I look at that, I have to decide kind of how thick I want that border to be. And because it's the final border, I can, you know, do a little bit more with kind of visualizing. So I want it to be thicker than this border. Obviously, I want the stripes to run in the same direction. So that's just all down to how I cut it. I want it to be thicker than this border. I don't think I want it to be as thick as that one, because if I do it too thick, it's going to dominate. So I think, so this finishes at an inch because this finishes at 1.5 inches because I cut it at 2. This is going to finish at 3 inches showing because it was a 3.5 inch strip. So I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to cut this at 2.5 inches. I think that looks about right. Then that'll finish at 2 inches. And so it'll just be smaller, slightly smaller than this, but bigger than this one. And then I will add in the final touch, the binding once it's quilted. I don't know if I'm gonna quilt it. I gotta think about that. Do I want to quilt it traditionally, or do I want to like do it as it turned? It's such a small project. I think, yeah, I think I'll quilt it more traditionally rather than doing it as a turn. I'll do that for something else so I can show you that technique. One of the things that happens when you have a pieced border and a solid border is that all of these seams have a little bit of give in them. So you'll have noticed that, right? They stretch just a little bit. Now we don't want to stretch this off center, but I do want to point out that that if you kind of look at this, it kind of bows a little bit in the middle. You can kind of see that as it hits this stripe, and that's because this seam has this kind of stretched a little bit, but this seam doesn't. It's relaxed. So that's the other reason I want a separate or a second solid border on this, is because when it's so heavily pieced, it can get out of square, and I really want to make sure that this is nice and square as a kind of a wall hanging style. So overall, I'm really pleased with this. So don't forget, we still have to do something with these numbers. Now, I'm going to cut this. I am going to cut this at, like I said, 2.5 inches. I'm going to put that last border on. But before I do that, let me show you what I'm thinking about for these numbers. I got to grab my pinking shears. So for those of you who don't know, a pinking shear is a shear that has this kind of like claw, this kind of texture in it. And this is what a pinking shear does. Here, I'll show you on a piece of scrap here. What a pinking shear does is it cuts this like, this border, this same kind of border that you see. You're actually going to see this on a lot of charm packs. And here's why. So this is why I got the pinking shears, and this is why I got the border. Because what I think I'm going to do with these numbers, you remember I said I've got these numbers. So essentially they're just numbers, navy blue numbers on a cream background, because at this point I've cut off the top. I've removed the kind of calendar aspect of this, so it's just a grid of numbers, right? Because that's all a calendar really is a grid of numbers. But what I have thought of is there's all these instances and times when I want to kind of mark my blocks or my rows or whatever with a number or a letter so that I can keep them track, right? So like I'll go to retreat or something and I will lay out a quilt. Just gonna cut this out while I'm talking. And when I lay out that quilt, I'll put it in order and then I'll stack it and I'll bring it home and I'll forget the order that I stacked it in. So I thought a series of marking numbers might be kind of fun. Now I've got a couple of other options that I use. I found these at the dollar spot at Target. They're great. They've got numbers and symbols on them, and they're clips or little, oh gosh, what are these called? Clothespins. Oh my goodness. I almost had my grandmother rolling over in her grave right there. But yeah, these clothespins with these little colored numbers. They're color coded. They have numbers and letters and symbols on them. They're super cute. I have a whole jar of these, and I use these a lot too because then I can put multiple things together and I can clip them together. But you can only get so many in the clip and, you know, all of that jazz. But with something like this, I could actually like make number markers out of these, and then I could have them for my kit, or I could give them as a gift. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to measure from the bottom of the number. Let's see, you can't even see what I'm doing. I'm doing it too close to me. Here we go. I'm just going to measure from the bottom of the number. So all I did was I cut out the cream color, and you can see that there's still this little bit of background. I don't need this whole thing. I might fold it in half. I might think about that thickness. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to fold it in half and have the thickness. So I'm going to kind of roughly eyeball. So this, okay, let's just do this. The distance from the bottom of the number is roughly, it's just a little over, yeah, that's 7/8. So the distance then, if I go 7/8 from the top of the number and make that kind of a mark, oh goodness. I'll use my pencil. No, I'll use my heat erasable marker here so you can see it. So there's my mark right there. So if I were to make that the fold line, you can see I've got this kind of like factory fold in here already. Let me just press this really quick. I don't want to press out my mark, but I'm going to press this factory fold line out. There we go. There we go. So there, I have my number, and I'm just going to trim this so that it's like an envelope. Now all I've really done is give this a double thickness. So it's finished on the back, it's finished on the front, it's a number. But here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking if I sew it all the way around and then I pink the edges. So the point of pinking an edge or to use a pinking shear on an edge is because that jagged edge just doesn't fray, right? So I use these like regular kind of scissors or cutting. Yeah, they're kind of dull. Okay. But the point of pinking the edge is that once you've pinked an edge, the edge really doesn't fray. So even though that edge got a little fuzzy because the scissors aren't very sharp, it's not fraying. So this cut edge that I did not cut on the grain, right? It frays like this over time, and I get all these little strings everywhere. But this cut edge doesn't fray. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew around in a rectangle here. Just maybe I'll do it like a ½ inch in, and then I'm going to pink the edges, and then I'll have a marking like a number 1, and I will have numbers 1 through 24 to be able to mark. And that's actually quite perfect because that means that if I have like a quilt that's, you know, 6 by 4 blocks, that's 24 blocks, and I can mark them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, like I can mark them in order. And because it's fabric, it won't transfer anything. It's not going to leave anything. I can pin it to stuff. I can pin it and repin it. It's not paper. And I think the other cool thing about this is I could actually like then put them in the blocks and like stack them flat in my project bag. So I'm not worried about them. I think this is exactly what I'm going to do with these numbers. So I'm going to do it with this first one and then show you. And then I think I'm just going to do it. I think I'm going to make a number set, and I'll either keep it for myself or I'll give it as a gift to another quilter this year. Let's see how it turns out. Oh, for cute. How adorable is that? Look at that. I just put my hand behind it so you can kind of see. The edges are pinked. It's finished on the back. It's not too precious. I didn't like spend a whole lot of time, you know, making the stitches perfect or anything. That is a perfectly serviceable marker for all kinds of things. I think this is, I'm super excited about this. Now I'm excited to do the whole thing. So this is what I'm going to do with the numbers. And then I will have used this whole panel. So remember, if you remember back to the beginning, we had a panel. We had 2 half yards of contrasting fabric, and we had 1 yard of this wood fabric. And so what I'll end up doing then is the rest of the panel will be made into these numbers. This will be the rest, that second border, and then I'll use the rest on the back. It should be just about right, and if I need a little bit extra, I can always use the rest of the yellow on the back. And then I will use this, the blue, as binding. I'm super excited about this. That's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna finish this up. I'm gonna finish up the numbers, and then I will do a final kind of like, here's the final project of everything. That's the plan. So you can see that improvisation, it doesn't always have to be like a huge project, number one. And number two, you really get the opportunity to try something a little bit different, experiment, fail forward like we talked about. And really you get the chance to look at something for its attributes instead of what somebody else intended it to be. The designer intended this to be a really specific thing. We bought it because we thought people would like that really specific thing. We put it in the shop because we thought people would really like it, and they have really liked it. But last year we went through our advent calendar so fast that we bought extra this year, and they're not moving as fast. So we wanted to offer an alternative. And so the challenge was to come up with a different way to use this panel. And I think that's something to try in a variety of ways. I think we're going to do this with a couple other panels, just so you can see when you really like something or you really fall in love with something, you can always pick it up without knowing exactly what you're going to do with it, and then build some thoughts over time, think about it a little bit, go to your stash, go to, you don't always have to know exactly what the plan is when you purchase something. If you just kind of understand what you're liking about it, what attributes you like about it, and then kind of have things that kind of go with it. So for example, if I had just bought this panel and I had not bought this other matching fabric, it doesn't matter. Once I thought to do this, I could have found a navy blue, I could have found a yellow, I could have found this like a varnish or a wood print color. I could have found this kind of a brown. I wouldn't have had to have the yardage that went with it. And if I had yardage that went with it that I had purchased at the same time, but it wasn't enough, or I had an idea that I didn't have enough for, even if I couldn't get more of that specific yardage, I could always find something else to complement it. So that's the thing with improv, is there's always somewhere to go. There's always something to try. And I really encourage you to give it a shot. Give yourself the freedom of trying something completely new and potentially making a giant mess. So happy playing, everybody. I'm going to finish this up, and then I'll show the projects at the end. Thanks again from Seams Like Quilting, from all of us at Seams Like Quilting, all two of us. All two of us at Seams Like Quilting really appreciate you watching, and we will be back with some additional, I think we'll do this again, some additional panel improv on its way.